Chapter 6. Sung Suho was then a year old, the day the cute baby finally took his first steps. Like all parents, Suho's house was very chaotic, in a slightly different way from others. Honey Suho, our dear Suho, what's wrong with Suho? Suho's mother, Chahain, was screaming in disbelief. He's floating on air! What? Suho is flying around the house right now. Suho took his first step in the air, not on the floor. In fact, it was one of the special powers that Suho inherited from his father, Sung Jinwoo, the ruler's power. It's been so long. 1-year-old Suho learned how to fly before he could even walk. Beru sniffed as he recalled how that sight was like the story of the extraordinary birth of a hero in mythology. Back then, Earth was a very peaceful world. The power that Suho inherited was created to destroy everything, and was of no use in a peaceful world. No, it wasn't just futile, but rather, it has the potential to make a life impossibly normal. Sung Jinwoo decided to seal that power until Suho could control it. The apostles of outer gods are invading Earth. Now is the time to use that sealed power of young master. Skill, ruler's power loves. Active skill. No mana is required. Can physically affect objects without touching them, leaving Beru's fuss behind his ear. Suho fired the arrow he held with his invisible hand in the opposite direction. I'll give it back to you. You have killed a goblin archer. The goblin archer fell down with an arrow stuck in his throat. Meanwhile, the other goblins behind him were startled. They turned their backs and started running away. Do you think I'd let you escape? Suho also chased him right away. Huh? With just a single leap, Suho outran the fleeing goblins. He looked at one of the goblins. Their eyes met awkwardly in midair. As much as your muscle strength has increased, your jumping power will also change. You'll get used to it soon. Beru's laughter while explaining sounded annoying for some reason. Suho immediately hit the goblin's head with an axe. You have killed a goblin, spectator. Suho took down 2 goblins at once. He wiped the goblin blood off his face with the back of his hand, and looked around with a sullen gaze. He didn't have time to think it over because he was fighting here and there, but now he realized that this black and white world was never favorable to him. The malevolent gazes could be felt all over the ruined city. The flesh he cut through was stimulating his senses stat. That's a lot. That's right. This is the land of death. A world that had been abandoned without an owner for a long time. In that period, wild monsters have built their habitats on this land. Beru's smirk while explaining was truly evil. If it wasn't for that cute mini size, it wouldn't be hard to believe that the true owner of this place was Beru. But now, Beru spread his short arms and spoke. Finally, the true owner of this land has returned. I hope you will win. Take back the land that was taken away by those foolish invaders with your own power. At that moment, a new quest window opened in front of Suho. Quest Survival. The inhabitants of the Shadow Dungeon will never acknowledge you as the owner of this land because you are weak. Prove yourself worthy by surviving within the required time. Required time, 4 hours. Remaining time, 4 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. Quest Survival. Survival? After reading the quest, Suho's eyebrows twitched. With that, Goblin Captain uses item horn to call his subordinates. Goblin Captain uses item horn to call his subordinates. Along with the roaring voices, the goblins hiding all over the city began to appear one by one. Expecting that there would be a lot, but still, there's too much. Suho flashed a tired look on his face. You're kidding, right? I need to hold out for 4 hours like this? Of course, you don't have to kill them all. Right now, young master is only at level 3. Try to survive somehow. The more you struggle hard, the more you will naturally level up and become stronger. Beru winked and raised his thumb. His face was filled with a smile like that of a father looking proudly at his grown son. Why did that sound quite mean? But now was not the time to overthink. They are coming. Suho hurriedly took the second axe from the hand of the goblin he had just killed. Item, Goblin Stone Axe. Difficulty to get. Type, Axe. Attack power +5. Hand axe used by goblins. Item information floats above the axe. 1 for each hand. Holding 2 stone axes in each hand, Suho's eyes glimmered. But something made him more anxious. The approaching goblins are all now holding axes on both hands. Suho immediately opened the status window and allocated all 5 remaining stat points into muscle strength. Muscle strength 15 to 20. Suho's hand holding the axe felt strong. Muscle strength stat increases strength and speed. Considering that his strength stat at level 1 was 10, his strength was now twice as strong. With this power, he can jump faster! Using that strength, Suho swiftly turned around and started running away. He looked for a terrain that was advantageous for a battle with multiple opponents. You are brilliant. After all, the weak have their own way of fighting. It's like watching a larva succeed in its first wriggling. Ha! He was so annoying. As Suho ran, He recalled all the great impressions he had with Beru when he saw him for the first time, and erased them all. Even his past, where he lived as an ant lover for a long time, has also been wiped out. When I go back, I'll burn all the ant pictures first. Suho was determined to draw anteaters from then on. Suho definitely felt the effect of added strength. Holding a pair of axes, Suho ran wildly. He hit a goblin axe with his right axe. He hit the neck with the left one. He turned around and cut off the ankles of the goblins that attacked from behind. Throats got cut. You have killed a goblin assassin. You have killed a goblin spearman. He killed 2 of them at once, but the counterattack was worse. Axes and spears flew in from all directions, aiming for Suho. Half of them were dodged, but half were not. HP 190. It hurts. As his body strength level decreased, the wounds on his body started increasing. As his physical strength decreased, so did the number of wounds on his body. However, Suho gritted his teeth and ran towards them again. This time he slashed 3 of them. Meanwhile, Suho also got 4 more attacks. HP 190. Cut 1 more head. This time he received 3 attacks. HP 190. Before he knew it, his body strength level was reduced to half. That's how much Suho's body turned into a bloody mess. Right then. Skill Endurance Leviant 1 was acquired. I got a skill? Suho's eyes widened. Usually hunters live their whole lives with only the skills given at the same time as their awakening. In order to acquire additional new skills, they needed the expensive runestone that are found very rarely. But he was able to get that precious skill for free during a battle. Skill, Endurance Leviant, passive skill. No mana needed. You have invincible tenacity. Increases physical defense by 20%. He was able to feel the effect even before checking the skill description. The pain from the wounds on the body was alleviated. The intimidated goblins screamed and scattered in all directions. At the same time, the sound of horns calling more of their companions rang from all areas. Suho hid behind a pillar and caught his breath. Wow, it hurts. Beru jumped up and stomped his feet. Are you in so much pain, young master? Well, you're young, so it would hurt. You'll get stronger as you get hurt. I'm so happy to know that you've acquired an endurance skill as much as the attacks you received. Suho, who had been pressing his wound with his hand to stop the bleeding, glared at Beru. There was an ant the size of a fist, smiling brightly cluelessly. Why don't you help me instead of just watching? Beru was a strong monster who tore apart the huge wolf with his own strength. He looked so reliable back then. After his body got smaller, he seemed to have no intention of helping Suho. But Beru had his own circumstances. Of course I want to do that. But I must conserve my strength as much as possible in order to return to outer space, where His Majesty is waiting for me. Beru was still in the process of restoring his lost strength in preparation for his return, which he was doing on his own. It's all because Sung Jin Woo, who could recharge his mana, was too far away. Besides, if I participated in the battle, the amount of experience that was for young master would be drastically reduced. At a time like this, how about killing at least 1 more of them and aiming for a level up? There was nothing wrong with Beru words. The problem is that it sounded too much like a mockery. He had been talking nonsense on top of Suho's head since earlier, which made the latter annoyed. Although it didn't seem like Beru was doing it on purpose. It was just purely an evil nature that lacked humanity. Maybe that's why he was not human in the first place. Young master, they're coming again! Stand up and fight! It wouldn't be long until you level up! Suho gritted his teeth and stretched out his hand. Ruler's power. An invisible hand flew forward and lifted a stone axe from the goblin's corpse. Suho noticed during the battle that the ruler's power could lift a weight of 10 kilos. It has the power to easily lift a baby who has just taken its first steps. Of course, a stone axe would also be possible. Besides, when he was young, he used this ability to fly around. Suho rotated the stone axe that floated in the air around his body. This would solve his minimum defense. Seeing that, Beru's eyes sparkled. He used the ruler's power in such a way it seems to be working. That mini-ant is no doubt evil. Your level increased. Your level increased? Time went by slowly. Still, after being bloody and struggling for a while, his level was gradually increasing. When he finally leveled up, the wounds from the goblin's axes were completely healed, and the blood flow stopped. His body strength, which seemed to dry out at any moment, quickly got replenished. Most of all, as his level went up, Suho became stronger and stronger. Finally, remaining time 0 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. You have completed the quest. Your level increased, level 7. When the timer stopped, the goblins who had been ferociously chasing Suho until now scattered and hid in the darkness. Is it over? Suho looked around without putting his guard down. Before he knew it, the corpses of goblins were all around him. A heavy silence fell, just like when they first came here. Good job, I'm so proud of you. It was Beru who broke the silence and clapped like a seal excitedly. Finally, Those wicked bastards acknowledged young master. Now they must have realized deep within that young master is not as weak as he looks. As he looks? How did I look back then? Well, initially you were at the level similar to a larva that can easily get killed when stepped on. Now you're already at level 7. Larva, he still wouldn't stop it. Suho shouldn't have asked. Right then, the quest completion reward has arrived. Do you want to check the reward? When? Yes. As soon as Suho finished answering, the message unfolded. The following reward has been prepared. Reward, Runestone Shadow Fragment. Chapter 7, Shadow Fragment. This is the kind of reaction Beru expects from Suho when receiving similar power to the Shadow Monarch. Oh, amazing. They're giving me this as a reward? In the last quest they gave me stat points, and this time they are giving me runestone to acquire skills? Wow, is it okay to get it like this? Beru thought of something to say before that. I told you, everything in this place is for you, young master. Beru's lips formed a smirk, along with his condescending look. This level up system is an auxiliary guide for the stable growth of the young master. It is an improvement system used by His Majesty in the past to fully receive the power of the great monarch in the weak body of a human being. Suho cut him off and opened his mouth. Wait, what? It was a summoning skill? The look on Suho's face was pure disappointment. Beru was surprised. What kind of reaction is that? What are you talking about? How can you react like that after receiving such great power? No, it's just that summoning skill is kind of... Suho tried to explain. These days, summoning skill is treated indifferently among hunters. The dungeons beyond the gates are a bloodbath. Hunters could never let their guards down even for a bit, or else the monsters' claws would rip their necks apart. The floor and the ceiling were full of dangerous traps. They could only be responsible for their own respective lives in that place. Combat hunters have strong bodies, so it didn't matter. But mage hunters are nowhere far from ordinary people in terms of physical abilities. Among them, mage hunters with summoning skills were even more vulnerable. As they entrusted all the battles to the summoners, they were no different from helpless baggage following them. That's not all. It consumes a lot of mana. It's difficult to look for a useful summoner. Even if you do find one, it's not as strong as you think. No. Beru stomped his feet with a sad and frustrated look on his face. The image of him mocking Suho for being weak disappeared, and all there was left was anger. Seeing that, Suho felt a little sorry. I'm sorry, but what can we do if that's the reality? But it's definitely a good thing to acquire skills. No, don't comfort me by pretending to be so considerate. This is genuinely a good thing. Oh? You seem to have changed your tone a bit? Huff huff! It was a moment when Beru's retained concept and historical drama tone were suddenly gone. Okay, anyway, I'll accept the reward. A runestone appeared in Suho's hand. Runestone Shadow Fragment. Breaking the runestone lets you absorb the skill. Suho broke the runestone without hesitation. You have acquired Skill Shadow Fragment. At that moment, a shadow rose up from under Suho's feet, wrapped around his whole body, and then disappeared. A skill window opened in front of him. Skill, Shadow Fragment LV Power 1. Shadow Power. No mana needed. Drains mana from dead bodies and transforms them into shadow soldiers. The probability of shadow release failure increases proportionally to the target's ability level and the elapsed time of the target's death. Number of shadow fragments? No, 3. Transforms into a shadow soldier? After reading the information, Suho's gaze turned back to Beru. It's a shadow demon with black smoke surrounding its entire body. That's right, Beru answered. It's a skill that makes soldiers like me. Shadow fragmentation or release is an essential power that made the current Shadow Monarch Sung Jinwoo exist. At that moment, Suho realized that there were numerous goblin corpses surrounding him. Black smoke slowly arises from the corpses that he killed in the past 4 hours. Shadow release is possible on this target. Shadow release is possible on this target. Shadow release is possible on this target. Every time he looked at the black smoke, the same messages appeared over and over again. Shadow soldier. Is this some kind of a necromancer? The concept of creating soldiers from corpses was similar to necromancers commonly found in games. As expected, it wasn't really something good. He had seen it on the internet before. There are several types of summoning skills, like summoning spirits from nature and taming them, or taming a living animal. Among them, the role he hated the most was the necromancer, because there are a lot of restrictions. First of all, the part where there had to be a body was the most problematic. I would need to hunt for a body first, just like now. That means I can only control those that are weaker than me. He thought he had to try it out himself to know for sure. Shadow fragment. A message appeared after Suho's words. Specify a shadow releasing skill command. I need to specify a separate command for that skill? Suho thought for a moment. Beru beside him kept moving his body. Why? Do you have something to say? When Suho looked at him, Beru sighed. Oh, nothing. Why is he acting like that all of a sudden? Suho squinted his eyes. He didn't know what Beru was going on about, but he uttered the command without hesitation. He thought it would be better if the command was intuitive. Arise. As much as he waited, Beru clenched his fists and said strangely, "This is it." Then, an extraordinary thing happened. Suddenly the laughter of the goblins echoed through the air. Shadows began to wriggle from the corpses of the goblins that had fallen on the floor. They seemed to be alive. Oh God. Suho's eyes widened and he looked around. From all sides there was endless vile laughter like that of villains, and black hands were stretching out of the shadows. The hands began to crawl out of the shadows, like demons who came back alive from hell. Shadow release succeeded. 3 black goblins whose bodies were made from hazing black smoke appeared in front of Suho. Shadow Goblin Lever, basic class. The 3 shadow goblins lined up waiting for Suho's orders. You surely don't look very strong at all. Beru also noticed the same thing. Even with the similar shadow fragment skill, the difference when the shadow monarch Sung Jinwoo uses it was too evident. That's also true when Sung Jinwoo first acquired that skill. He was at level 50, while Suho is only at level 7 now. If the player's level is low, the effect would inevitably be weaker, even with the use of similar skills. Tut, that's how it usually is. Shadow soldiers who were just released are downgraded versions of their original form. They're also smaller? That's right, I guess. Then obviously the same goes with their strength? Very slightly? Even the speed, Beru muttered in a very small voice. Shadow fragments are affected by intellect stats and levels. This is a really good skill if you use it for later. It's a really, really good skill. There's no other way to explain this better. Oh, okay. Suho looked at the shadow goblins, waiting for his orders. He then prepared to return back. Wait, shouldn't you be giving your orders right now? Beru was surprised. At that moment, a sound came from Suho's stomach. I haven't eaten for 2 days, Suho said seriously. Beru no longer argued. Alright, it was all about eating and surviving, regardless if you were a hunter or a shadow monarch. Anyway, if you use the key to the shadow dungeon, you can come in and out of here anytime. Get some rest. Suho took out the key and hovered it into his own shadow, just like when he entered. Are you sure you want to leave the shadow dungeon? Yes. The moment he turned the key, a shadow engulfed Suho. You have exited the shadow dungeon. As soon as Suho returned to the hospital, he collapsed on the bed. I've really worked hard. Suho lays down on the bed for the first time in a while and lets out a deep sigh. In reality, it was only 4 hours, but it felt like 4 days. Although all of his body strength returned to normal as he leveled up, he was completely exhausted mentally. The door of the ward opened and people in suits came in. Excuse us. Is this the room of Mr. Sung Suho? Suho immediately noticed who they were. There would only be one group of people who would look for him in that kind of situation. We are from the Hunters Association, as expected. The people in suits approached and bowed their heads in front of him. Sung Suho, first of all, we would like to express our utmost gratitude. What did I even do? Suho made a puzzled expression. Thanks to Mr. Suho, many people's lives have been saved. We would like to thank you on behalf of them. Well, I didn't do anything that great. You did something really great. Oh, that scared me. The man who seemed to have the highest rank turned his face towards Suho. Then, a soft smile formed on his lips. Mr. Sung Suho, you are very commendable. Such a young man risking his life to save people in today's harsh world. Oh no, sir. Seeing the older man take out a handkerchief to wipe his tears made Suho feel uncomfortable. The employee next to him patted him on the back as if he was used to it. Team leader, you should stop crying and focus. Right. It's probably because I'm getting older, so I have a lot of tears. Mr. Sung Suho, I am Han Jae-hyuk, team leader of the Hunter Association. The purpose of our visit is... Team leader Han Jae-hyuk smiled as he held out the thick mana meter he brought. This is to measure your mana level. They had no doubts that Suho had awakened. He was found passed out in the Korea University Art Museum, which had become a field-type dungeon. There were even corpse fragments that were confirmed to have been monsters lying around. Even the reporters are constantly asking for information to write on their articles. Han Jae-hyuk gave him a wink. Okay, sir. Suho gently puts his hand on the mana meter. The magic crystal embedded in the center emitted a subtle light. After waiting for a while, the measurement result came out. Wait, this is... Team leader Han Jae-hyuk scratched his chin as if he was seeing something unexpected. On the other hand, Suho's expression did not change. as if he was not curious about the result at all. Obviously, it's because the status window in front of him is already showing his mana level. Mana power level 46. You are an E-class hunter. The other men in suits felt disappointed but did not show it on their faces. They expected a hunter who was able to do all those things to have fairly high results. But he was only in the E-class. Team leader Han Jae-hyuk had different thoughts. The value of a hunter is not based on class. Even though one is an E-class, if they risk their life to save people, there's nothing even greater than that. The old man smiled warmly and patted Suho on the shoulder with his hand. Mr. Suho, we're looking forward to your good performance in the future. Yes, sir. The association members bid Suho goodbye and left the hospital room. Beru then peeped out from Suho's shadow after waiting. All right, let me give you a briefing. From now on, Suho! The door of the hospital room opened again. Beru went back into the sullen shadows. Chapter 8. How are you feeling? You've been unconscious for 2 days. The person who entered the hospital room was none other than Assistant Professor Lim. He checked the complexion of Suho sitting on the bed and met the student's gaze. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for running away alone. He apologized immediately. To be fair, there was nothing a single E-class hunter could do in the same situation at that time. The first thing that Professor Lim learned after awakening as an E-class hunter was to run away as far as he could if he meets a monster. However, Suho, who was just an ordinary person at the time, was extremely heroic. He rescued people from such a dangerous place, risking his life. Professor Lim was greatly embarrassed of himself, thinking how cowardly he was as compared to Suho. Suho felt resolved with the professor's apology. It's all right, sir. A professor is in no place to apologize to someone like me. No, even if I had 10 mouths, I still have no excuses. After repeatedly apologizing, Professor Lim took out the hot porridge from the shopping bag he was carrying and served it in front of Suho. All right, you're hungry, aren't you? You must eat porridge if you have an empty stomach. Here, the spoon. Oh, so quick-witted. As soon as Suho saw the food, his stomach made a loud noise. It smelled like sesame oil. It's a beef porridge that looks and tastes good. Suho grabbed the spoon and started scooping up the porridge. Having starved for 2 days, the food tasted marvelous. After you finish that, would you like some apples? Somehow there were apples in the fridge. It turns out that Assistant Professor Lim had been visiting the hospital since the day Suho passed out. Professor had been taking care of me all throughout my life, but after leveling up, I don't feel sick at all. Suho was thinking of getting discharged today when Professor Lim asked something. Those guys who just left seem to be members of the Hunters Association. What did they tell you? They measure my mana power level. Huh. Measure? Did they confirm that you have really awakened? Professor Lim's eyes widened. What was your mana level? They said the dungeon was D-class, so you must be E-class according to them. Eh? Really? The older one couldn't believe it. Suho unfolded the mana level result sheet left by the association member a while ago. Oh, what? It's true. With mana level at 46, it's even on the lower range among E-class. Why do you look so disappointed? Were you expecting something? Wow, goosebumps. Were you really thinking I was going to say that I am a superb class hunter? No wonder you were being so kind. No, you rascal. If you were such a great hunter, you wouldn't have fainted in that dangerous place to begin with. I just thought you were at least D-class. See? You were expecting something else. Professor Lim felt so wronged that he even stood up. He put down the result sheet and tried to appease Suho. Hey, it's rather better. E-class is great, you punk. Don't you know that being an E-class hunter gives more stability than D-class? No. Heh. Of course you wouldn't. You also just gained your consciousness. From now on, trust and follow me. As an E-class old man, I will lead you to the world of E-class hunters. Dungeon raids are conducted with thorough division of labor. The raiders are the first to attack. The collectors follow from behind to retrieve the bodies of demons or monsters. The miners dig dungeon resources in the backline. Among those, E-class hunters take on any job except as raiders. In other words, E-class hunters are the most flexible in covering a task. It's true that they have more stability than half of D-class ones. D-class hunters are the weakest among the hunters who can enter the dungeon raid. In a way, they can be considered as the ones most exposed to risk. Meanwhile, E-class hunters are excluded from all combat activities, so they can earn their wages, and at the same time, be safe while doing so. Of course, some of them need urgent money, so they take risks and volunteer for the raider squad. But it is not common. Their hospital fees get more expensive. Maybe if they have an acquaintance who is a healer or so. The next day, Suho was discharged from the hospital. He arrived at the Korea University Art Museum. I never thought I'd come here again. Suho looked up at the art museum, which was horribly half destroyed because of Beru, and self-reflected. He went there today to work as a miner. Except for the Shadow Dungeon, it's the first real-world dungeon he went to, just because Professor Lim offered to assist him. Oh, for your information, all classes are temporarily non-face-to-face until the dungeon is completely raided. Suho, you're going to take a leave of absence since you are now a hunter, right? Of course, sir. Besides, the exhibit is now over as well as the semester. Okay. I'll stop by the assistant's office later and apply for a hunter leave of absence too. Should we start now? Assistant Professor Lim's eyes glimmered as he looked at Suho with full motivation. His stance posed a senior figure. Hint. Today I will give you a quick guide on the life of a wise E-class hunter. First of all, miners. Showing off too much like a know-it-all. Ah! Beru muttered as he jumped out of Suho's shadow. Professor Lim was so startled he fell on his butt. Monster? Beru looked at the professor with a condescending gaze. Say, scaredy cat. Professor, I know more about hunters way better than you do. Better learn from me instead. He then jumped in front of Suho and spoke loudly with his arms spread wide. Hunters are described by their name itself. They hunt. Their goal is to slaughter, overcome, and devour the enemies. So they must kill again and again in order for their power to be. Suho's grabbed Beru like a ball. Why did you suddenly come out? I felt the energy of the dungeon nearby. Right now, young master is as weak as a larva, so I'd be relieved if I could stay close and protect you. Beru's body stretched out and escaped from Suho's hand. He jumped on Suho's shoulder and flashed a pitiful look on his face. Suho could no longer be deceived. If I let this pass again, he'd never stop talking. Professor Lim, who finally collected himself, carefully pointed at Beru and asked, Suho, is that a summoner? No. Beru answered sternly in place of Suho. To be accurate, Beru was his father's summoned monster and not his. If you are not a summoner, then what are you, sir? Professor Lim seemed to be so intimidated that he started speaking with honorifics. Beru glared at him. I'm a guardian. Guardian? The professor tilted his head. That's right. In human terms, should I say uncle? Well, I had those moments. The professor didn't understand what Beru was talking about. Beru muttered an incomprehensible sound and glanced at Suho's face. Professor Lim ignored Beru and asked Suho directly, Did you awaken as a hunter with summoning skills? Well, yeah, I guess that's how it went. Interesting. I've never seen an E-class hunter with that skill before. Professor Lim was lost for words. He didn't bother to talk about that skill being the most irrelevant anymore. Not to mention Suho is an E-class on top of that. Minor among the most minors. The professor turned his gaze to Beru, who was on Suho's shoulder. He was just simply surprised at Beru's sudden appearance, but looking at him now, he didn't look useful, though. Those gazes of yours are very offensive. Do you want me to pluck those eyes? Professor Lim lowered his gaze. He seemed to be very observant, seeing how he's very sensitive with his surroundings. Surprisingly, he can also talk. That's pretty useful. Not all E-class hunters have that skill. You are still considered lucky. Just to share with you, my skill is escaping. Oh, so that's why you're good at running away. Professor Lim felt hurt by Suho's remarks. It hurt because it was true. Suho became a miner through Professor Lim's recommendation. Alright, let's work hard. Miners consist mostly of E-class hunters who looked like they were working at a construction site. Newbie, come and take your pickaxe. Grab. Suho held the dungeon pickaxe with his hand. The man handing out the pickaxes smiled at him. If it breaks while you're working, you can come back and get another one. But we would need to deduct the cost from your daily wage, so be careful. You're very young, but already very commendable. I heard you're still a student. Hey, do you know this student? Surprisingly, most of the miners recognized him, most likely because of the news. Suho smiled bitterly as he recalled the news that was posted on the internet yesterday and today. Was the headline something like Hero of Korea University, Become an E-class Hunter? It was vague, so he didn't know if that was a compliment or not. If he had become a hero of the art museum as an ordinary person, he would have won a Brave Citizen award. But he awakened midway, so he was just recognized as a hunter. On top of that, he turned out to be part of the lowest hunter class. That kind of situation seemed to turn out well for these uncles, though. Haha, what a shame. If only I had awakened a class or two higher, my situation must be completely different. Don't be too sad because your class is low. We also eat and live well, don't we? Right. It's quite hard physically. But at least we don't need special skills aside from being good at using the pickaxe. Everyone was eager to give Suho words of advice, as it had been so long since there was a newcomer. Beru didn't like the warm atmosphere. Young master, Go and level up instead of dealing with these idiots. Don't waste your time. Oh, is that a summoner? It's my first time seeing something like this. It would be cute having him around, but it's too small to be useful for mining. Miners gathered in awe at the sudden appearance of Beru. Beru was too cynical and ferocious. Hey, don't come near me, you rude creatures. Young Master is very weak and he could die if he gets hurt. Young Master, rest assured, I will protect you. Suho stared blankly at Beru. He didn't know if Beru was just being protective or sarcastic. This summoner is reliable. Might as well try to work too. Beru's cuteness made the miners chuckle as they moved away in twos or threes holding their pickaxes. Suho got a brilliant idea. Beru, yep, just give me your orders and I will slit the throats of those blasphemous bastards. Don't do that. What can I do for you then? Take the goblin corpses out of the shadow dungeon and bring them here. Chapter 9. Yes, young master. Beru, who responded to Suho's orders, tried to ask once more. Are we going to stab those men behind their backs and kill them? What are you talking about? They are going to work. Beru jumped down and was enraged. What is he saying? He couldn't believe it. What on earth is this all about? The Shadow Monarch's power ability was so great and mighty only to be used for mining. In outer space, those millions of troops are fighting in a war. Such a futile thing to use it for mining here. I get that, but right now, we only have 3 weak shadow goblins. We need to be practical. I'm pretty sure my father also worked this way before, when he was weaker. But still. You also told me last night. Suho recalled the conversation he had with Beru the other day. They were on their way home after being discharged from the hospital. Beru spoke with a serious expression. A young master, I will briefly summarize our mission. What the fist-sized creature said was too grand. Firstly, protect Earth from the monsters of outer space. You mean to go into the dungeon and catch the monsters, right? Yes. As you hunt monsters, your level will gradually rise, young master. The stronger you become, the safer Earth will be. Secondly, we must somehow find Miss Hine. Right. Do you have ways on how we can locate my mother? Unfortunately, there's none. But who knows? As we catch those extraterrestrial monsters, we might find some clues. In the end, this also meant entering the dungeon. Lastly, this is the most important one. Beru pointed at himself. I need to recover as soon as possible and return to the battlefield where His Majesty is. The balance being maintained there must be at stake as I, the core power, is missing. Suho was also curious. Beru's current small form was just a way to conserve his strength as much as possible. But his original form and power were a living nightmare itself. With such a huge amount of power missing, he couldn't imagine what the war was like. What should we do to regain your strength? The corners of Beru's mouth rose. Of course I need to eat. It was an absolutely evil and dreary smile. It's been so long. In the fragments of a world long forgotten now, he remembered the Queen of Ants. I'm going to make the strongest soldier. The Queen needed the strongest soldier to rebuild the kingdom that was being destroyed by humans and lead the kingdom's inhabitants. It went on for 6 months. She eventually conceived a life by gathering all her mana and nourishment. That determination and the main goal of exterminating all humans were combined, creating a terrible monster beyond imagination. The monster's innate skill is predation. It could make some of the mana and intellect of the target its own, just by consuming the target. Beru spoke after recalling those memories. My natural skill is predation. Continuously devouring either human or mana gradually replenishes my strength. It's an inefficient method that was used in the past, but it's nothing much now. Both for humans and monsters. Suho felt it again. Beru definitely lacks humanity. He's not a human after all. The sight of Beru drooling as he mentioned eating humans was the perfect devilish image itself. Suho spoke firmly, but still don't eat any humans. Huh? If you do, only eat bad people. Beru's eyes squinted at those words. As expected, like father, like son. His Majesty mentioned the same thing. A long time ago, he also ordered me to eat only the wicked, if I were to consume humans. My father too? What's your standard for being wicked then? Well, of course, Belle smiled faintly. The ones who harm young master? Back to the present. That was what you told me. Beru brought up Suho's words. So, of course, shouldn't you be entering the dungeon and leveling up? How can an E-class hunter enter a dungeon alone? You know very well that E-class hunters cannot be raiders. Suho was being extremely realistic. Professor Lim also explained that the only tasks E-class hunters can take are for production work. He was thinking of going for reassessment after his mana power level reaches D-class range. The division of hunter class was also a system that has recently been established, so there are still errors in the meter. So let's start with what we can do now. Suho smiled as he said that. Beru didn't feel good about that smile. Why are you smiling like that at me? Our third mission. Suho recalled what Beru said with a knowing smile. You must regain your mana as soon as possible, so you need to eat, right? Yes, whether humans or monsters. What about Mana Stone? Flinch. Beru's expression hardened. You said your skill is predation. Wouldn't your mana be recharged if you eat Mana Stone? That's right, but the stone has very little mana, so it only fills my stomach, and the efficiency is not so. Is that a problem? You can just eat more than that? Suho smiled brightly at him. You can pick them up freely here. Suho passed through the gate with the miners. The appearance of the dungeon he entered was completely different from the Shadow Dungeon. The Shadow Dungeon was a vast, ruined city that was so wide no one could even guess its size. This place, on the other hand, was a winding cave. In addition, each person had a pickaxe in their hands, so it felt like they were here, literally to mine. Suho and the miners moved slowly as they moved forward. Inside the dungeon, the view was not very dark, thanks to the luminescent mushrooms and moths everywhere. The sound of mining works echoed loudly. Perhaps because everyone had experience, the sound of pickaxing was very uniform and rhythmic. Suddenly, all of those sounds stopped at the same time. Huh? What's that? Everyone turned in that direction. There was Suho commanding the shadow goblins. 3 shadow goblins were pickaxing while laughing. There was Suho nagging them from behind. Amazing. So that's how the summoning skill works. No wonder people were surprised. The said skill was well known to be used in assisting in combat with the help of useful creatures. However, the summoners just followed behind Suho, who was giving instructions like a Pokemon trainer. It works though. The shadow goblins that Suho was giving commands to looked a little smaller and weaker than normal goblins. But they had enough strength to wield the pickaxe, and most of all, they never got tired no matter how much they worked. Whereas Suho needed to drain a bit of his mana to replenish his used strength. Wow, look, those newbies are amazing, ha ha ha! Suho shouted and laughed at Suho. It was all nonsense to say that the summoning skill is useless. It was such an incredible skill. Even now, as we're distracted, they might be able to dig up everything by themselves. We can't let that happen. Let's show our seniority in terms of experiences. The miners chuckled and started pickaxing again. It felt quite pleasant to see the short goblins working together next to each other. Such a nuisance. Seeing that warm situation, Beru at the back chewed the mana stone like a cookie. Meanwhile, at that same time, the raiders, made up of D-class or higher class hunters, were raiding a place far deeper than the mining area. This dungeon is absolutely empty. I know. Only wolf monsters have been popping up since earlier. Wolf skins don't pay. The collectors, who were following the raiders and skinning the monster corpses, weren't too happy. Of course, that's what they said. But that didn't mean that wolf skin was not worth any money. Besides, sometimes there were corpses with mana stones, so they had no choice but to work hard. Phew, we need to earn money either way. Wolf skins piled up on the wagon he had brought. Right then. Huh? It seems like there's something here. One of the hunters who was walking in the cave in the lead called his companions. Unexpectedly, there was a huge ruin in front of them. The hunters who saw that became very nervous and wary of their surroundings. Could it be that there is a boss-class monster here? Normally, there was little chance of powerful boss-class monsters appearing in D-class dungeons. However, the appearance of such a structure meant that something extraordinary could have happened. And that particularity would never have been a pleasant situation for the hunters. What's this? Did something happen to have a ruin like this? Shouldn't we go out and ask for more support? The hunters were making small noises. However, the leader of the raid intervened and looked around with a cautious expression. Shh, be quiet. For now I haven't detected any monster in my radar skill. Really? How could there be a structure like this without any monsters? That's what we need to find out. A small smile formed on the captain's lips. Who knows? Maybe a treasure is hidden instead of a boss monster. Treasure. The hunter's eyes suddenly changed. Not only monsters' corpses and the mana stone could be found in the dungeon. There were also rare items. Those items were the only way to increase the strength of hunters, whose levels would not increase once their class was determined. Captain, there's something here. Looking around, a sword was found stuck in the center of the ruins. It was a sword emanating unusual energy. This is crazy. The hunter's eyes were filled with greed at the same time. We hit the jackpot. Wow, what a weapon. They would have to take it outside and do an assessment to find out, but it was a weapon that looked great at first glance. Captain, I will get it. Among the hunters, the strongest man took the lead, spitting on both of his hands. Oh? Wait, Kim Youngjin, take precautions. The captain tried to dissuade him, but his hand had already grabbed the handle of the sword. Right then, a humming voice came into Kim Youngjin's head. Who dares covet the sword of the monarch? Chapter 10. Who dares covet the sword of the monarch? Youngjun, what are you talking about? Strange words came out of Kim Youngjun's mouth as he grabbed the handle of the sword. The captain, who tried to stop him, instantly felt frightened. Youngjun took the sword. I'm asking who dared covet the sword of the monarch. His eyes were stained red as he repeated the same words. Youngjun? Are you all right? He slit the captain's throat. A fountain of blood gushed out. Silence passed over that absurd scene, as if time had stopped momentarily. Then, what? Captain. The hunters behind came running in fear. Youngjun, why did you... Another head got cut. Youngjun? Only then did they realize. Blood flowed from Kim Youngjun's eyes as he pointed the sword towards them. Who dares covet the sword of the monarch? He then laughed wickedly, seeing the bloodbath. A wolf howl began to resonate around the ruins. Chills. Beru's eyes changed in an instant. He turned his head and stared hard at the darkness of the dungeon. What was that? What's wrong? Suho asked Beru, whose gaze was fixated in that area. I suddenly felt the presence of a monarch. Monarch, my father? No, there used to be not only one monarch, Beru explained. Originally, not only the Shadow Monarch, but several monarchs existed in this universe. However, when they invaded Earth, all of them were annihilated by the Shadow Monarch Sung Jinwoo. Then that wasn't my father? If that was the case, my power would have been recharged in an instant. But my mana is still the same, and this energy, it's something that I know very well. Right then, there was again another wolf howl. Starting with that, the howls of ferocious monsters began to be heard simultaneously from all directions. What's that? What is happening? The miners' complexions turned pale, and they looked around anxiously. Finally, screams were heard. It was the voice of people who went further to go mine. Every minute the screams were getting louder and closer. Then, a wolf suddenly attacked Suho from behind. Young master. I know. Suho thrust the pickaxe he was holding into the wolf's mouth. What the hell? Its teeth were so hard that the pickaxe was crushed to pieces. But that was able to buy some time. As the wolf chewed up the pickaxe and spit it out, Suho gave an order to the shadow goblins. Attack! The 3 shadow goblins attacked the wolf at the same time, but it was not enough. The shadow goblins were also holding the same mining pickaxe that Suho used, and the wolf also chewed those up. The bodies of the goblins were bitten and torn apart too. But, right then, the magic that escaped from Suho's body returned the bodies of the shadow goblins to their original state. The shadow goblins are immortal. They can be revived with young master's power. In an instant, the revived shadow goblins clung to the wolf's body. Then they stabbed the broken pickaxe into the wolf's body mercilessly. The wolf, which had been charging vigorously, tumbled on the floor, screaming unsightly. You have killed a steel-toothed lichen. No wonder it can chomp the pickaxe. However, just killing one isn't enough to alleviate the situation. The number of wolves that appeared was dozens, and the miners were being bitten helplessly by the wolves' steel teeth. Their teeth? The pickaxes were of no use in combat. Inventory. Suho hurriedly took out the goblin's stone axe he had acquired in his inventory and gave it to the shadow goblins one by one. Young master, even these stone axes will be shattered if bitten by the wolves. I have as many axes as I can, Suho shouted as he threw a stone axe at the wolf that was attacking the miner. The stone axe flew and hit the wolf's body. It's not dead yet? Ruler's power! A transparent hand stretched out from Suho's hand. It then picked up the stone axe that had fallen on the floor and struck the wolf's head. The monster burst out in agony and died. You have killed a steel-toothed lichen. That was just the beginning. Everyone gather here! Suho screamed so that the confused miners could hear it. To save them, he jumped between the wolves without hesitation, holding a stone axe in both hands. The 3 shadow goblins following him raised their axes. However, the order that Suho gave to them was different. Don't attack, just bite and distract them. The shadow goblins were confused. Keep running away and lure all the wolves down that passageway. Killing the wolves one by one wouldn't be efficient. At Suho's command, the shadow goblins began to scream and lure the wolves away. In the process, their body was constantly bitten and torn, but they kept coming back to life, eventually weakening the wolves. In the end, most of the wolves became frantic chasing the 3 shadow goblins, and when they all went into the passageway in the corner, "Close the passage now!" The miners who were sitting on the ground covered in wounds hurriedly got up. Then, they brought all the carts of mana stones he had collected so far, and piled them up in front of the passageway where the wolves entered. After somehow blocking the passage, the miners collapsed on the ground helplessly. What just happened? How did those monsters come all the way here? What happened to the raiders in front? Anxiety appeared on their faces. It was rare for monsters to reach the mining area far behind the raiders, not unless... Could it be that all of the raiders died? No, because when they went inside, they knew that there were only wolves inside. This was only a D-class dungeon as well. The wolves growled from behind the blocked passage. What should we do? At this rate, there was no guarantee that the way out would be safe. Beru? Suho called Beru, who had been staring into the depths of the dungeon ever since. Beru's expression was serious. Young master, it seems that something serious has happened. After all, I'm sensing the energy of the Beast Monarch. Beast Monarch? He is the king of the beasts who were killed at the hands of the Shadow Monarch. It seems that there is someone who is working behind those wolves. Are you saying that someone who has already died has come back to life? I can't completely figure it out. The power to rise from the dead is something only the Shadow Monarch can do in this universe. However, even with the shadow power of Monarch-level beings, they could not be resurrected. They are not simply dead, but their existence itself has vanished. So it was nonsense that the extinct monarch would come back to life. This aura is most likely to be the remnants of the Beast Monarch that flowed through the dimensional rift. Beru, who finished explaining, looked at Suho resolutely. Young master, let's run away from here. Run away? Suho made a puzzled expression. Beru, who had been aiming to fight and kill all the time, is now showing the exact opposite. I've been constantly saying this, but young master's strength is less than that of larva right now. It's so weak that if you fall into it and the monarch class hits you, you'll die in an instant. We need to get out of here as soon as possible. Aren't you just upset that I gave you some mana stones instead? Suho remembered clearly, since earlier he had been calling Suho a larva, but now he's saying that Suho is at a level lower than that of a larva. Right then. The hole they had been trying to block suddenly exploded. The passage opened. The miners, who were relieved that they had barely contained the wolves, moved immediately and grabbed their pickaxes. However, unlike the expectation that the wolves would come out all at once, a familiar face walked out of it. Mr. Kim Youngjun, a miner who recognized his face, called him. He said that Youngjun was an acquaintance who was among the raiders. What the hell happened inside? We all almost died. He approached naturally, but Kim Youngjun just looked at him expressionlessly. The sword in his hand moved. Move out! Suho's ruler's power grabbed the back of the miner. But, just like a flash, Kim Youngjun's sword already slit his neck. As a thin red line formed on his neck, his complexion turned white, and he fell to the ground. Red eyes staring at them arrogantly, Kim Youngjun opened his mouth. Who dares invade the habitat of the Beast Monarch? This is the sanctuary where the king of the great beasts dwelt. At that moment, an enormous amount of energy exploded from his whole body. An ominous aura making it impossible for everyone to even breathe covered the area. Effect: fear has been activated. The player's ability is reduced by 50% in 1 minute. Suho's body became heavy. We need to run away right now, Beru whispered hastily. If only I had my strength intact, there would have been no problem. It's not an exaggeration. Beru's power was completely exhausted from unlocking Suho's seal. Beru, who was muttering as if he were angry, looked at Suho's face and paused for a moment. Suho's gaze towards Kim Youngjun was burning hot. Right then, a quest has arrived. The quest window appeared in front of Suho. Urgent quest: defeat the enemy. There are beings with intent to kill the player around. Kill it to secure the player's safety. Number of enemies to kill: 1. Number of enemies killed: 0. Beru spoke in an urgent tone. Young master, just ignore this quest. The weak have their own way of fighting. Like before, let's run away using the shadow goblins as a shield. Okay, Suho muttered in a soft voice. Beru's eyes brightened. I will guide you on the way out. Let's fight this. What?